Kelvin, a lot to talk about. Let's start with the Tracey Crouch fan-led review that's come out in the last few weeks. A lot of clubs have expressed their support for it. What's your takeaways having read the report?
I think we as a club definitely express our support for it. I think it was a reading the whole document and the executive summary as well. I thought it was a very thorough document. I think Tracey's done a great job of looking at the wider game and not just focusing on certain points of it. And obviously all the input, including ourselves and from the fans and from everyone in the game. I think there's a lot of positives that have come out of it that we can hopefully take in to improve the game as a whole.
One of the key points, in fact possibly one of the main points, financial redistribution. A lot has been made that parachute payments can distort the game, and it puts EFL clubs under unfair pressure when trying to compete to get into the Premier League. This review recommends a redistribution of funds.
Yeah, I think we've said it for a long time, and in terms of the reliance, football's biggest issue, in my opinion, is the reliance on owner funding. What happens is football clubs don't run sustainably, and some of that is decisions that are made, but some of that is also pressure to get success, and we see it in the Championship all the time. The desire to try and get into the Premier League where there is more funding available it makes people make rash decisions in terms of funding, and owners in terms of funding, and there is that demand for clubs to be successful. So then there is a demand for funding beyond the club's means, and that creates a big problem. And some of the owner funding levels in the Championship, are scary. And even at our level and League One, and even now in the National League, the owner funding, and that's where the biggest risk for clubs are. And it's easy to say you should run sustainably, but it's also then very difficult. We as a club could run sustainably if us as an ownership group decided that that's the way we wanted to go forward, but then our budget would be in the bottom one or two of the league, and we're not, and so we make it a conscious decision to do that. Now, is that a risk? Well, in our case, it's our risk, because it's our money, and it's not our external debt. But obviously some clubs, it's been external debt, and that's a massive risk. So football's got to figure out a way to stop the reliance on owner funding model. It doesn't work, hasn't worked for some clubs, in the short term, and it doesn't work longer term, because in the end, as wages have gone up and as player wage inflation has gone up to compete with the Premier League and et cetera, and that trickles down to our level as well. We're paying players a lot more now than we did, say, 15 years ago, 10 years ago even. So, as wages go up, that pressure on owners to fund it and finance it becomes more. So then the levels of financing required, and there's less people available to finance that at that level, or want to finance at that level, and so we get into situations like Derby, where Derby had a very rich owner who lost the motivation, or things happened and to fund the football club, and Derby find them in a situation where they are. So the financial redistribution is very important, and the EFL, we support the EFL's view of 75-25% split, because one of the things we feel is I think the EFL feel, and us as clubs feel, is it's not as big of an impact as people would think at the Premier League level to be able to take care of. It's not just take care of, but it's actually support the pyramid. I see it as, and I think the pyramid is essential to football in this country. And I've seen it on the other side. I've seen a non-pyramid structure in terms of American sports, and with no promotion and relegation in some of those sports, and so therefore it's solely reliant on just having the one league, and that becomes very, very difficult, and I think the promotion and relegation and the pyramid system we have here is fantastic, and it's part of the reason why the Premier League has been successful, in my opinion.
Something else the review touches on, and I know you agree, but just throw more money at something doesn't solve anything. It's important that it is linked to spending controls too.
Absolutely. We were fans of the player control measures, the player cost control measures that were put in place last year. And we would support. You have to have it. You can't just increase revenues without controlling spending, because what you'll see is you'll just see that increased revenue being spent on players. So we would be supportive of a financial redistribution model, with alongside that, salary cost management in whichever way, whichever format that suits. So whether it's a hard cap or a hard cap with a tax on top of it if you want to spend more, or it's revenue based. Whatever that system is, it has to be regulated, it has to be policed, and there has to be punishments in place if it's broken. But whichever format, that there has to be something in place.
Something else the review recommends: an independent regulator for football.
Yeah, I think it's now probably got to a point. It's important. We certainly wouldn't, be adverse to that. I do believe that if you sort out the financial distribution model better, then a lot of the need for regulations and more regulation kind of goes away, because it takes away a lot of the pressures that cause a lot of the problems. I think, but I think for us to get to the financial redistribution, I think the independent regulator is going to be an important part of that, because they're going to eventually have the responsibility to, if football can't figure it out for ourselves, if the Football League and the Premier League can't get together and figure it out, then they're going to have to step in and as from an independent body and do that.
Something else that the review talks about is greater supporter engagement. Now, I know over the last few months fans have voted for their views on the East Stand, they've voted for the kit, they've voted for the supporters representative on the board, so I know we're seeing that here at Northampton Town, but that's something else the review is in favour of.
Yeah, and again, we feel strongly that we engage very well with our fan base, probably a lot more than a lot of other clubs, and we've looked at that, and we've actually taken a look inside, internally about that, and we've had discussions about that, and I think I said at the time, the reason we talked about a supporter representative of the board, because we saw some of this coming from the report, and we took what Tracey was working on and what some of the feedback, the early feedback, and said, this is going to come, so let's get ahead of it and increase what we were already doing. And having Tom on the board, I have to say, having Tom on the board has been fantastic. Having that position is great, but Tom as well as an individual has worked really well, in my opinion, because we can as a board, and we can, as a management staff, you guys as well can ask Tom what his feeling is, and Tom talks to so many people, he engages with so many people, which is part of what I'd hoped he would do, and hope that position would do, and he has those conversations. So it's a good gauge. He doesn't talk to everybody, but it's a good gauge of the feedback, and it's interesting, because we talk about the East Stand plans, and we have a view, and we like to think that we've got the best interests of the club at heart, etc. And we feel we do, and as a management group, and as a board, and as owners, etc. But to be able to then put that out to the fan base, and the fan base come back with such an overwhelming response, to say that they, especially with all the detail there, as much of the detail that can be there, here's the detail, what do you think? And you can't get any better than that. And it's almost like, I think someone quoted to me, I think it might have been Churchill, let the people, let them decide, or something like that. And it's true, and it's been, and that sort of engagement has been great. And the numbers, I think probably more impressive is the amount of people that have voted in some of these votes, and that's important. And even the kit, that's the sort of engagement that we're really looking for. So I think, again, supportive of those points in the and we talk about the heritage stuff, and we talk about a golden share, and they're interestingly, they're not the sort of things that we would ever look to change. I'm actually quite old-fashioned, and I like football clubs playing, where where they have been for years, and they like badges and they like things like that. I'm not the type of person who wants to modernise it and etc. all the time. Sometimes it's good for that, but it's also would be good to have somebody in the background that has the ability to that has to be a bit more of a collaborative decision than not.
We'll add the contact details for Northamptonshire's 8 MPs to the website, but you'd very much be in favour if supporters wanted to show their support for the review for them to contact their MP.
Yeah, absolutely. We have contacted and we have good relationships with our MPs. We have contacted them and we will be contacting them more, and we want people to show their support for Tracey's report and the fan-led review and as a whole, and we want them to voice their opinion as well, because it's a fan-led review, and it's taken a lot of comment and information from fans and supporters, and this is where it's quite interesting, because we talk about we are looking, the Football League and lower down the pyramid is looking for further support from the Premier League, and it should never be a charity. It should never be just give the Football League money or etc. But we have to look at how the Premier League has been so successful. We have to accept, and I think the Premier League has to accept that the Football League and the pyramid has been part of that success. I think it's something like, I think there's been, you'd have to quote me on the numbers, or don't quote me on the exact numbers, but I think there's been something like 55 teams that have played in the Premier League, and I think 40 of them have also played in something like that. So those sort of numbers, and maybe when you put this information up on the website, we get this correct. But it's something like 45 have played in the EFL, and so it's not. There's a group of Premier League clubs and there's a group of EFL clubs. There is that sort of going back and forth. And that's important, and I think you look at players in the Premier League, the top players in the Premier League, Harry Kane's of this world, we've had it with Carl Walker, we've had it with Dominic, players that have started their careers and made their debuts in the EFL, and I think that's important to recognise that, and recognise there is a global responsibility for the Premier League, and there is we have to, obviously we all saw what happened with the Super League and the reaction, and so I think sometimes if we're going to have an argument with the Premier League, it'll be with owners and maybe chief execs. I don't think it's going to be with fan bases. I think fans will recognise. I think fans of Premier League clubs will recognise that the pyramid needs support and the pyramid needs help, and they'll see the pyramid as an advantage of the game as a whole, and they see that the success of their club as a Premier League club isn't just built on it's just us and we're going to get together, because that's why you saw such an overwhelming support against the Super League, because whilst it may have been individually it was good for maybe a Man United or a Liverpool, fans could see it wasn't good for the game, and that's what we've got. That's a decision I think we've got now with football and the fan-led review, and what Tracey's recommendations is we've got to look at what's good for the game, and of course it's good for Northampton to get more revenue in, and as long as the cost control is with there, but it's also good for all the other clubs in League 2 and all the other clubs in League 1. And again, we have to, if you look at the sort of money that it takes to support a League 1 and 2, sometimes you're only talking about one player, one transfer, and in the scheme of things, is that you're not talking about clubs, every Premier League club having to give up 100 million. It's potentially a Premier League club giving up what they spend on a tenth of a player, so so we have to look at it as a whole, and I think that's the important part.
On to other things. 8 wins, 1 draw from the last 10 games. Good time to be a Cobblers fan at the moment.
Yeah, good. Bad timing, obviously, with what's going on in the country with COVID. But no, I think we've been on an excellent run. I think the last 2 games have been very pleasing in the sense of just very good performances, solid performances. I think we're a functional group. We're not. We definitely are good to watch as well. I think that needs to be said as well. I think we're definitely we've got power, we've got pace, we've got excitement. I think fans are really enjoying it, and it's just a shame that hopefully momentum's. We've got really good momentum, and you would have gone into the next home game with looking forward to that, but. It is what it is, and we have to deal with what comes our way, and like a lot of clubs and people in general society. So we'll just work with what we've got. But yeah, it's an exciting time.
Recruitment is obviously a topic at this time of year, with January not too far away. A few changes to strengthen the recruitment structure announced this week, and looking forward to it, the January transfer window.
Yeah, no, I just came from a meeting actually, Colin, John, and some of the others, and Alex, and in terms of and what I'm really excited about, and what was really important was the statistical information, and I think that was what was probably lacking in the summer, and probably one of our disappointments was that we didn't have that tied down as much as we would have liked, and that's why we've kind of moved in this direction. When it was discussed, and John and Colin were very positive about going in this direction. And that, I would say it's probably their suggest, which is what we've talked about, but it was their suggestion to kind of advance this, and they would have preferred, rather than getting a head of recruitment, they would have preferred to bring in an analyst to make sure that we're focusing on the data and the information that's out there, and making sure that someone's fully responsible for identifying the players, and then comparing some of the statistical data now that we're working with is really interesting. It's interesting to see how we can now compare players statistically with others. You can never, and hence why with that we've also strengthened the scouting system, so that rather than having one person going around looking at players, or one or two, we've now got a dedicated team of more full-time, not fully full-time, but more full-time in terms of seeing games, watching games, and then it all feeds back into the one system that then can be used then as we get to the recruitment committee decisions, and Colin and John making the final decisions or recommendations on players. So yeah, I think it's exciting, and it's definitely a step forward.
Kelvin, just last question to see where we are with the council and the delay with the East End.
We actually don't see it as a delay. I know Jonathan said that we were trying to get on a cabinet early December, but the reality is it was probably a bit ambitious, and I understand it in terms of let's get to a decision. But I think what's important for us is that when we do get to that point of the decision, that it's all been it's been a robust process. Personally, we think we're there now, but it's not our process, it's not our decision, and we would have liked to have seen it this side of Christmas, obviously, but because we want to get some certainty and we want to know where we're at. But I think that will slip into the new year, and it's about making sure that when we do get to that cabinet decision, then the members can actually make that decision based on, right, we've got all the information, here it is. We've done it, through the process, it's the legal process. The lawyers have signed it off, the QCs have signed it off, etc., and we can make a decision based on that. And so, and then someone, obviously people are going to have an opinion. So someone can have an opinion based on the decision, but it can't be, well, you made this decision because you didn't have the information, or you didn't have the sign off of the QC, etc. You can say, I disagree with that decision, but that's different to, well, the process is wrong, or at least you didn't give enough people time to understand it, etc. So that's why the process is so important. We understand, look, people are always going to have different opinions, and that's just life, and that's the world we live in, and that's acceptable. But and so we understand where Jonathan and the officers at the council are in terms of making sure that the process is robust, the process is as transparent as possible, which I think they have. You can't get more transparent than saying, here's the report, here's this, etc. So once they get the final bits of sign off and paperwork, hopefully we'll be at a point where a good decision gets made for the football club, and because it is important for us as a club. There's no question about that. I think we've shown that, we've said that, and I think, and again, we absolutely, categorically have the support of the majority of the fan base. We've put the plans up there. Obviously, some of those plans, will change in certain ways in terms of what gets put into the stand, and we've said quite clearly in our plans that things may change in what room is such and what's this, and some of that it will be fan led and what do the fans want to see, etc. But we've put it out there, and from our perspective as a club, we've done what we can. We've done as much as we can. We have an agreed deal, subject to cabinet approval and the sign off of legally and etc. And we've got overwhelming support from the fan base. So not much more we can do apart from concentrating on winning football matches and making sure we're up in the promotion places like we are now, and continuing that, and then wait for the council to finish their process.
Thank you.